Vayichan sham Yisrael enged ha'ar kulanu ke'echad.
Joining us from Milwaukee, we have the honor of having Rabbi and Rebbetzin Twerski, also known as the Haran Steipler Rebbe, probably one of the biggest Muchasim in the world, besides Chernobyl, I imagine, also an Enikel of Sons. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. What a great honor to have you. Welcome.
Pleased to be here.
So we're obviously in a time of great stress for most families, with all kinds of its corollary chinuch issues. Could the Rav and the Rebbetzin tell us, you have couples who are together now more than they've been in probably since Sheva Brachas. And together with that are probably issues of shalom bayis, harmony, especially anxiety. What would the Rav and the Rebbetzin give us a little shalom bayis, a small chashin shmooze for many of us 10, 20, 30 years into our marriage?
A chassan shmuz, not a kala shmuz.
Kala shmooze too, the Rebbetzin a kala shmooze.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I think the Rebbe's remarks were probably more insightful than my own here, but in my chassan shmuz and in the kind of shmuz that I think would be relevant in the stresses of today's marriages, I think people need to step back, and they need to recognize how important the quality of their relationship is, the impact that it has. Not only because their relationship reflects the divine relationship with Klal Yisrael, and everything that we do has repercussions in that relationship, but most immediately because the children who grow up in an environment where there is strife or there's tension and there's perhaps disrespect taking place, children become very insecure. Not only do they have bad role models for their future, but they themselves are feel that they are not in a protected environment, and it has an enormous emotional impact, and it takes a big toll on them. So I think that husbands need to step away, step back, and say to themselves, this is not a game, and regardless of whether this lasts for a week or a month or however long it may take, even an hour, that a person can invest with quality and the kind of respect and hopefully affection in the relationship, it changes the world that these children grow up in, and it changes their psyche, it changes their emotions, it changes their good health. So I would say, step number one for anyone today, as I would tell a chosan, you're going into a relationship. You need to know that relationship is going to demand thought, discipline, sacrifice. You need to know that it's a relationship you're going to have to work at, and Hollywood has destroyed that concept of working at making a relationship good. So that's kind of what I would say. Rebbetzin?
So I want to sum up. The Rav is saying that if you love your children, love your spouse.
Absolutely.
Good? Right?
Right.
Actually, it's not original. But the Rabbi the Panovizher Rav once said, if you want good children, it's a two-step program. The first thing is pray a lot. And the second one is the relationship between husband and wife. Those are the two major ingredients. and cultivating children that are healthy. But what I would add to what the rabbi is saying is that especially in our time now, I've told our chevra here that no question that we find ourselves in a difficult situation. However, it is also a great opportunity because we have an opportunity to create an experience for our children that they will take with them into their life ahead. That is, that how do you cope under situations that are less than ideal? How do parents relate to each other in situations that are less than ideal? And when they look back many years in the future, and they say, well, you know what? Under those circumstances, it was remarkable. Here we were stuck in small quarters all together, and our parents managed to be civil, at the very least, to each other, and even loving to each other. And that's a huge, huge opportunity, an opportunity to children. Just so many people over the years have asked me, how do I teach my children to cope? And I've always said to them, there's only one way you teach your children to cope, and that's by modeling coping. And coping under good circumstances is always an achievement also, but certainly under these circumstances, it's huge. Now, after the caveat is that we're not going to always be successful. And in other words, not to have expectations that are unrealistic. There will be lapses, and those lapses don't have to be catastrophic. So long as we recoup and we move forward in doing the things like holding our tongue when we feel like responding hurtfully to our spouse, and we manage to control ourselves. Every time we do that, it's huge, absolutely huge. And our children, we have to know, and this has been confirmed by psychologists everywhere, children are much more astute and watch us very, very, very carefully at all times, and they pick up every nuance. So I think this is a rare opportunity for us to really teach them something that if we didn't have these circumstances, we wouldn't have this opportunity.
Thank you, Rebbetzin. Let me direct the next question to you. A lot of people are worried about Parnassa. Right? We have the highest unemployment since the Depression. That means we're going back almost 100 years. We haven't had a plague in over 100 years in this country, right? And anxiety is, anxiety is right now Michel Feige. How do we, both for ourselves and for our children, how do we teach emunah during these times? How do we use it? Like the Rebbetzin is saying, where do we find the silver lining? Yaakov said after he defeated Sari Shalesav, he says, I'm not going to let you go. Ki'im tevarcheni. In other words, it's not enough that I beat you. I have to get a blessing from the two. How do we get the blessing of emunah from these times of angst?
Well, I think, again, the only way we teach anything, and we want to teach our children emunah, is to model emunah. And it's not always the case that we're in that space at the moment. Like I might not be in the space of emunah right now, but it's okay to speak of him. Hamanti ki adaber. I have emunah. Why? Because I speak about it. So sometimes the speaking about it and in a sense, almost pretending gets me to a place where it's real. And there are certainly things in every situation that lend themselves to be interpreted in the context of emunah. So So even as things are difficult, you put whatever bread on the table, or the meals that are provided for yeshivas or whatever, and we can say, wow, look at this. Look what the Rebbetzin Shalom has his people who are, Ashrechem Yisrael, Asherinu Matov again, who, oh, look what they're providing, or a government that in the midst of it all is providing meals, so we do have food on the table. So thank God, it all comes from Hashem. Relating everything to the goodness of the Rebbeinu Shalom on a regular basis, or kids, let's go look outside, the sky is blue. The trees are in bloom. There are flowers out there, connecting them to nature and looking at Hashem's world, even in the midst of these difficult times, all fosters and cultivates emunah. So we don't have to really look that far to talk about Hashem's providence and the fact that he's there even in the midst of us all, while not marginalizing what's going on. Yes, it is difficult, but give a look. What's going on? Look at the wonderful things that are happening.
I would like thank you, Rebbetzin. I would like to ask the Rav, if you were to define chinuch to a parent, how would you define it?
So I think the Rebbetzin has spoken, or has certainly alluded to it in several instances during her remarks. Chinuch is primarily a setting an example. The kind of things that a youngster will observe on a day-to-day basis, not just in the conduct of the parent, but in the simcha of the parent, in the sense of privilege, in the fact that we are the Am HaTorah, that just all of the emotions of pride and dignity that we believe obtains to us because we're Bnei Yisrael, and that, in a certain sense, because we take seriously the first siman in the first sif in Erechaim, Shulchan Aruch Erechaim, where the Ramos says that we should think of ourselves as living in the presence of the sovereign of the universe, that we behave differently when we are in the presence of royalty, when we're in the presence of aristocracy, and we ourselves feel summoned because we are in that presence. That means that we have to speak with this in a certain way, that we have to relate to each other with a certain deference, and that in general, the way in which we conduct ourselves is one which is mindful of what is supposed to be happening when we are in the presence of the King of the universe. So it's very much a factor in not just in the conduct but in the emotion. I have been in the last several months severely tested by intractable and excruciating pain from my back and my leg, and I had to wait for surgery in order to relieve it, which I just had 2 weeks ago. But in that entire period, I said to my friends, to my members of my family, I don't know what someone who does not have a sense of bitochen, of a sense of hashgacha pratis. What do they do with that suffering? It has to play out with them as though it were random and meaningless. I don't know how anybody could possibly survive that. And in the midst of my worst pain, I was able to say, Rebbeinu Shalom, I know that there's meaning and purpose in this. And while I'm still not able to accept it b'simcha, I can't accept it b'ahava because I know it comes from a loving source. And I think that in times of stress such as this, when there are deprivations, when there are stresses and things that are less than ideal, I think that if we ourselves respond with the requisite understanding that none of this is happenstance, and none of this is capricious. That we're living, each one of us, under the direct surveillance of a caring God, and that the Rebbeinu Shalom is looking at us and is watching us and is expecting of us, and that this is all relative. I think that will be reflected in an emotion, and that emotion, at the very least, will be one of dealing with it with equanimity, and perhaps even with simcha.
So the Rav said two things. He said we should remember that Kol Yisrael b'nei Malachim heim.
Right.
Paskin lahalacha, that let's say a queen could go out with a certain beged, and even any Jew could go out with the same beged. It's not considered a maser Shulchan Aruch Paskins because Kol Yisrael b'nei Malachim. And we shouldn't forget our royalty and our behavior.
Absolutely.
And also recognize that the essence of our teaching is that it's an ishdakin mikra, it's an ishdakin teva, and therefore whatever happens for a purpose. There's no random happenstance. And when we understand these two things, it allows us to both model, we are the Ben Melech, and to do it with a sense of confidence. So Rebbetzin, how do we make our Shabbos table special in a time like this? It's a good idea. How do we always make our on an eternal basis, Shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos all the time, but particularly in a time like this, I know by Yaster, every Shabbos there are guests. Right now, I'm sitting, badad, it's me, my Rebbetzin, my daughter, that's it. It's a small shop. How do we, in an environment that's clearly not an environment of celebration, of, Klal Yisrael, we're always coming together. How do we maintain that special atmosphere of Shabbos?
Well, there's some practical things. My husband has always suggested to our chaver that on Shabbos, read up on good stories to tell your kids. Sipurei tzadikim, tell them about great people, and especially in this case, maybe great people that handled situations that were less than ideal. So
no shortage of those by Jews, right?
I'm sorry?
No shortage of Jews by Klal Yisrael.
Right. And then, of course, to create a happy atmosphere by zmiros, by songs. And I think in particular, it has to do a lot with how respectfully a husband and wife treat each other at the Shabbos, the whole week, but especially at the Shabbos table. Over the years, we've had people that we were makarev, and the one thing that really clinched it for them to go on the journey to become frum was a Shabbos experience that they had in our home. They came and they said, you know what, it's very nice. We listened to your Divrei Torah. Divrei Torah were terrific and nice, but that's not really what did it for us. What did it for us is we saw how respectfully you interacted with each other and how respectfully you interacted with your children. To have a conversation with the children, ask them what part of the week was nice for them or what they're struggling with. Talk to your children, and certainly Shabbos is a very good time to do. But Shabbos, I was just remembering as you were talking that, I was born during the war, and we had quite a journey till we came to America, and we were in a refugee camp in Italy for a year and a half. And my mother, her blessed memory, told me that on one occasion, a fellow came over to me, and I was 4 years old at the time, And he said to me, "Oh, you poor darling child. We've been thrown around from country to country. We had gone to Israel, and the British didn't want us and sent us away. So, and he said, with no place to call home." And she said that I looked at him and I said to him, "I'm sorry, with all due respect," or whatever the words were that a 4-year-old would use.
In Italian.
And this is no Yiddish. I said to him, I really do have a home. I just don't have a house to put it into. And this is a very, very critical point, that we have, a house is not a home. A home is made up of the respect, the love and respect between parents. And that's what carries people through wars, and certainly this is in a sense like a war, but that's what makes all the difference. That's how people come out intact, is when the foundation that gives them the security is the relationship between their parents, the love the parents have for each other, and then that love that extends to them as a result. So I think if at the Shabbos table and the whole week long, but especially Shabbos table, the children observe their parents, and even though the tension is high, I think it's very helpful. And then my granddaughter just stopped by today, and I asked her, I said to Ruchala, "How are you managing to keep her, she has quads, Kinahara, and twins. So she has 6 little children who are under the age of 8. So I said that, and I said that, especially like, Shabbos and such, she says, "Well, my children help. My children help. They serve." And she says, "They help me prepare for Shabbos." She says, "Even though it takes me 3 times as long to prepare with their help, but they feel so good when they bring to the table something that they've made, and parents comment on it and praise them for it." So all of that is very important. Let them, they're being part of the family and part of making Shabbos.
Yeah.
I would add one point. I think that in order to preserve the sanctity of the Shabbos Sudas, that there needs to be very, very clear guidelines about what kind of talk is acceptable at a Shabbos table. And it's not about Hollywood entertainers or movies or sports heroes or political discussion. Those are all certainly not financial kind of stuff. Those things are not just extraneous. They really violate the Dabil Dov. It's a violation of the Shabbos speech. And I think we need the children need to know, or even the adults at our tables when we invite them, that the discussion that takes place over a Shabbos Suda needs to fall into the categories of things that are helpful in our luchnias, things that are of interest in trying to help other people in the lives of our community. Just things that are appropriate for. I remember once that I was at we were invited to be speakers at a retreat Shabbos that was given by a large organization, and there were a bunch of round tables, and there were families who were sitting at those tables. And at the table next to us, there was a fellow, and he was. It's not like he wasn't from. He was from. He took out a Wall Street Journal at the Shabbos table.
Im Toshiv mi Shabbos raglecha.
Right.
Atois chafotzecha v'yoyim kadshi. V'karasa l'Shabbos oineg. L'kdoish Hashem mechubad. V'chibadatai me'asois rechecha. V'mtzoichefzecha v'daber davar.
Exactly. Right.
So the Rebbetzin and the Rav are saying that the Shabbos table is an opportunity that Klal Yisrael has always had. We were always the nation of the Mishkan. Our home was the Mishkan. We didn't need a particular home We didn't build fancy edifices. We didn't have a homeland for thousands of years. The home of the Jew was, the house of the Jew was the Mishkan, and the time to create it is on Shabbos. That's through love and kavod. And the Rav is saying, and therefore it's remember, besides all that love, what not to talk about. Keep it sanctified. V'daber davar.
Excellent.
Great.
Could the Rav or the Rebbetzin share a favorite chinuch story? Where you saw that, through the right word, the right gesture, maybe turning around somebody, like a story where love made a difference, where chinuch actually made a difference in somebody's life and was able to effectuate change. Do you maybe have, I know the Twerskis are very famous storytellers. I've read a lot of the books that the Mishpach has printed. I've said over many of the stories. Is there any story that comes to mind?
There are many stories in my personal instance that I learned from my parents. But it was interesting. One of the things that I recalled in one of my drushes to the community was that as I grew up, I was trying to think of the ways in which my father disciplined us. So my brother, in one of his books, I think his very first books, said that the way in which he recorded the fact that when he was kind of called in on the carpet, my father would not say to him, you did a terrible thing or whatever, that he would say to him, "Es passt nicht für dir. Es passt nicht für dir. This is beneath, what you did was beneath you." It wasn't a disparaging remark, and it wasn't a put down. Quite the contrary. It was, you're bigger than this, and this is unbecoming of you. So that attitude was clearly the way in which our chinuch was delivered. But I remember in one instance that one of the mispalim who had a thing going with another one of the mispalim got me to go over to that other person and show him something that was very offensive and very insulting. And he found something in a sefer and he said, "Go over and point this out to that person," which I did. And of course, since I was the Rebbe's child and I did that, there was somehow it created a much deeper sense of offense in this person. So I had no idea, because I really was young. I had no idea what this person was asking me to do. And the only time my father actually physically did something to me, because the only time I remember, I did lots of unacceptable mistakes during the course of my growing years.
Not lots.
Yeah.
Rambunctious. He was rambunctious.
Okay.
Hardly.
The only time he ever did anything physical to me was that he took my hand and he slapped my hand very gently. He slapped my hand and he said, "You're never to do that again." And I from that little slap, I understood how profound and how deep the importance of dealing with another person respectfully was to the ethics of the family, which is.
You're saying that this is so appropriate. Rabbi Kiva's Talmidim shaloi nagu kavod zeh b'zeh. That's a fabulously appropriate statement for these times.
Right.
Well, thank you, Rav and Rebbetzin. We're out of time. It's a great honor to have you.
I guess you don't want another story. Okay.
Let's hear one more story. We'll go over time.
Okay. Tell you, it's a quick story. The thing that while you're talking, I was remembering was also about my father-in-law, blessed memory, and this was an occasion you talked about outreach and how you reach people. So they a couple who were survivors came over to my in-laws and said to them they were in great distress because their child had wandered off, and was at risk of dropping everything they had taught her in her Yiddishkeit. And maybe the rabbi and Rebbetzin could appeal to her. Maybe they could have some influence on her. So they said, okay, they'll do their best. Would she come for a Shabbos? And she came for a Shabbos, and they had very nice conversations over the meal, and it was very pleasant. And she was staying upstairs, and they're upstairs, kind of converted from an attic. And as she came down the steps to say goodbye to them, she saw that my father-in-law was standing at the sink, and he was washing dishes. And the Shabbos dishes. He was helping my mother-in-law wash the Shabbos dishes. Afterwards, she told her parents, she said, everything else about Shabbos was beautiful and wonderful. They're lovely people. They taught me a lot, but nothing, I wasn't really fazed by all that. When I came down the steps and I saw the Rebbe standing there and helping his Rebbetzin wash dishes, that did it for me. To see that there's caring, you set aside, it doesn't make a difference. You're a Rebbe or who you are. You have your wife. You don't want your wife burdened with all the responsibilities, and you care enough about her that you, no matter how it's going to look to whoever wants to see, but you're going to set that aside and do what you feel is the right thing to do. She said, that was it. After that, I embraced the entirety of Judaism, never had another problem again. So that's a good lesson for all you men. All you men, remember, help your wives wash dishes, help your wives clean the house, help your wives take care of the kids, be equal partners and all of that, because that is huge for everybody concerned. It's huge for your wife, it's huge for the children to see that, and it's huge for any observer.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to have you.
Good luck.
כאיש אחד, אוי אוי בלב אחד,